Alright, so I had said some pretty bad things about the Leupold Mark V HD. I'm just going to take a second so you can type down in the comments, I told you so. Alright, now that we're past that, so what exactly is going on with the Leupold Mark V HD? Well, first off, I want to say, sorry Leupold, I called your scope a piece of shit several times, and, well, this particular one just so happens to be running good. Why did I feel the way I feel about the Leupold Mark V HD? Well, this is what you would call a budget scope. Now, a lot of people took offense to that because they thought that I meant I was calling it a cheap scope. And that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when you're talking about class, we don't even need the whiteboard. First focal plane, 7x35, 35mm tube, 100 MOA corrections on the turrets. There's a class of scope that would fit in. I mean, yes, there's a couple other ones like Primary Arms, if you like buying scopes that they made their name off of selling stuff on eBay and rebranding Chinese stuff, you know, that's fine. And then there's Vortec, which, whatever, you know, get your Vortec then. Aside from, like, those couple of unusual options, there is a box of scopes that will hit those needs. In that box of scope, way at the bottom, at the cheapest possible price inside of that box, falls this scope. The competitive options are all like 3 or 4 times the dollar amount of this. Now, they get away with that by doing some things. Only 100 MOA of adjustment on the turrets. This particular one doesn't have a lighted reticle. It doesn't have night vision. It doesn't have any sort of laser rangefinder built into it. It doesn't use German glass. It uses Chinese glass. Or, the guy didn't come out and say that, but he wouldn't tell me what type of glass is in there. He's like, oh, we just get all of our glass from all of our different suppliers and we throw it in a box and we can't tell the difference.
Technical service.
How's it going today?
I'm doing well, and yourself there?
Not too bad. Alright, so I got a question. I have a YouTube channel and I'm making a video on the Leupold Mark V HD 7x35, but I'm struggling on finding what exactly glass is in there, and I was hoping you could help me out.
As far as the exact composition, or?
Yeah, like, is it German glass, or, like, what's the model number of the glass?
And so, we get our glass from about 3 different suppliers, 3 or 4 different suppliers all over the U.S. That can come from Asia, that can come from Europe. Just depends on who has our prescription. No particular scope model gets a particular glass of any one country of origin.
Okay. Do you know, you don't know if, like, it could be German glass or it could be some other brand, or, like, is there, like... I'm still pretty new to scopes, so you gotta school me on this.
Right. It's all gonna come from one of our suppliers, goes through our optics lab, gets approved, and then it goes basically in line to be assembled into a scope. So, you know, there could be a piece of German glass right next to a piece of Asian glass, side by side in the same tray, and
I gotcha.
There very well is probably going to be a mixed match of the glass in the.
Basically meaning, yeah, there's probably Chinese glass in there. Now, am I saying that Chinese glass is bad, or Chinese glass is not as good as Japanese glass, or not as good as German glass? Well, there's a reason you spend $6,000 on a scope like this if you want to buy a different brand, such as like Schmidt & Bender, I can't pronounce it, Night Force, something like that. A lot of that comes into having the guarantee that that particular scope is made with a particular type of glass. It does this with the turrets, it's got a zero stop, etc., 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 etc. You get the idea. So when I was growing up, there's a store, you may not be familiar with it, called Walmart. That Walmart made me biased against a lot of different things. For example, sometimes now one of my friends or something like that will be like, dude, check it out, I got all Lacoste, you know, I got a Lacoste shirt, or I got Lacoste cologne, or I got this Lacoste hat, and I'm like, yeah, I used to wear Lacoste all the time. Like, how come you don't wear it anymore? Oh, because my dad got a better job and we were no longer living in poverty and we stopped buying our clothes from Walmart. Because Lacoste started off as a Walmart brand and then it went to Japan and got popular, and now this $4.99 pair of shoes is worth like $200. To me, that's still a pair of shoes for $4.99. It will always be ingrained in my head that way. Back when head units were cool. If you're not familiar with what a head unit is, it's a stereo you would put in your car, because they used to come with like a radio or an 8-track player or something like that, so you'd have to take it out, you'd have to get a conversion device, put in a head unit, and put in a CD. Well, Walmart got Pioneer head units in there, so I'd see a Pioneer head unit and automatically I'd go, boom, Walmart. Someday, Century Arms might make the newest, greatest, bestest thing, and I will always see Century Arms as like the RAS-47, the C-308, you know, just stuff that falls apart. Regardless what that product is now, because I grew up in a time when Century Arms sucks, I will never look at that product as a tier 1 piece of equipment. I'm just not going to. It came from Century Arms, therefore it's a pile of crap. Who knows? Maybe they win the next military contract and put out the next widget that just blows the hearts and minds of the general public. I will look at that and I will see an RAS-47. So when I look at this scope, because our Walmart carried 3 brands, we had Bushnell, UTG, and Leopold. To me, this will always be a Walmart scope. There's no getting around that. It will always be a Walmart scope. So that is part of my bias. So what exactly happened that I was so critical with this particular piece of glass? It all starts with my recent and found love for carbon fiber barrels. I love the fact that it can shave weight off of guns. And because I don't shoot competition or anything like that, weight is a factor. With this particular rifle, I was making a clone of a sniper rifle called the Arctic Warfare. The parts I need to complete this project are still not available, so I was unable to make a clone, but I was headed in that direction. So then I'm like, well, okay, well, I'll just make a sniper rifle, period. It's no longer going to be a clone, because I can't do that. And I'll just buy the real one later, when I got money. Side note, I was going to not address this or just annotate it in, but every time I do not address this, it consumes the comment section. I know the English language is tough, and I am by no means saying I'm an expert in the English language, but there's a lot of confusion around the phrase sniper rifle. There is a sniper rifle, and there is a sniper's rifle. Now, I know these look very similar, and they can easily be confused, but there's a lot of confusion behind this. There is a large group of people that say this can only be a sniper rifle if a sniper is holding it. No, that statement is it can only be a sniper's rifle if a sniper is holding it. Like, I could replace this with Matt's rifle, and that makes sense. I cannot replace sniper rifle with another term. If I call this a pistol caliber carbine, that doesn't make sense. If I call this a bicycle, that does not make sense. You need to call this a sniper rifle because that describes exactly what type of rifle this is. You can say that term and people know what you're talking about. If I call this a shotgun, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So before you go crazy in the comments, have a better understanding of the English language. If a sniper is holding this rifle, then this would be a sniper's rifle. If a sniper is not holding this rifle, it is a sniper rifle. That term describes the configuration that the general public can understand, common usage. That is the key here. So one of the things where I could save weight is a barrel. So I went out and I spent the good bucks on a premium barrel and put it on there. This particular barrel is a carbon fiber barrel. I have never ran a carbon fiber barrel with a Magnum caliber before. I got one on my 243, but that's got like half the powder this Magnum caliber has. Maybe not half, but it's a lot less. Turns out when these barrels heat up, you know, depending on the manufacturer, no two barrels are going to be the same. Well, I should say, it turns out when this particular barrel heats up, it gives me a point of impact shift. And I stopped doing the 3-round group thing for zeroing because that's why I buy premium equipment. You don't need to do that anymore. One shot and the next shot will land on top of that unless you're not doing your job. Therefore, when you're zeroing, all you need is one shot. I shouldn't say that. Let me retake that statement back. Alright, so if I was zeroing and my first shot, I don't know, landed right here, and this is where I want it to be, I would measure with my reticle, I would adjust. Typically the second shot will be right in there. We'll say this particular one, it landed right here. So I make one more correction, boom, I'm zeroed. There's no reason to shoot it any more past that because I bought a good enough barrel to where the next shots will reliably land in that exact spot. And that's how I treated that rifle. And it worked great. Everything was fine. It was really cold out, didn't have a problem, shot it at 300 yards, shot a sub-MOA group, everything was just hunky-dory, like everything's looking great. I go out again, and I did some adjustments on the scope, so I didn't really think about it too much, but I'm like, hey, you know, it's in the same spot, you know, left and right should be relatively close in elevation. I'm going to be roughly like 19 MOA low because I went all the way to the bottom of the scope. So, you know, coming up 19 should be about all I have to do. And I didn't. I landed over here. Well, what I didn't realize is as I was shooting it at that range, I was correcting for it. For some reason, this barrel, when it heats up, it starts going in this direction. And then as it heats up even more, then the groups really start opening up. And that was screwing with me, because I have a premium barrel. I have what most people would call premium glass. I shouldn't have to do groups. One shot should tell me where the rifle's going to go. So, I'd zero it during that range session, and relatively fast succession, I would shoot relatively 20 rounds. And as I would see a correction, I'd be like, oh, you know, maybe I didn't get the correction just right, so I'd start throwing little corrections on it to correct for the barrel temperature, but I didn't realize I was correcting for the barrel temperature. And I'd leave the range with it zeroed on a hot barrel right here. Then I'd come back, I'd shoot again, and I'd be way the hell over there. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And the only thing that made sense to me is because it's just in the case like this, that going down the road with the scope shaking, it's like moving my point of impact over. And I'm like, it's got to be the scope. There's no other explanation. It's got to be the scope. Because I've never shot a carbon fiber barrel with a Magnum caliber. I was unfamiliar with how quickly they heat up and how a carbon fiber barrel can switch point of impacts. I mean, like I said, every particular barrel is an individual, and yours may not do that, or it may do it in a different direction, or whatever. So I'd go out again. I'd be over here. By the time I was done shooting, I'd have it zeroed on a hot barrel right there. Then I'd go home, I'd come back, and I'd be here again. And I just didn't know what the hell was going on. And then I was having troubles grouping. Because I'd be so angry, I'd start just hammering off rounds. You know, like, okay, damn it, zero, change to zero. Boom! Up, zero ain't quite right, change it a little bit more. Boom, boom. So I'd be like 5 to 10 shots into it, even before I would start grouping. And with this particular barrel, with the very little testing I've done, it looks like about 4 shots will stay sub-MOA. And the 5th shot, it'll start opening up, and I'll start getting a point of impact shift. So I'd be like 10 in there, and alright, so I got sub-MOA, over 1 MOA, sub-MOA. By the 9th shot, with very, very, very good shooting, I was just barely under 1. So with me being pissed off and just hammering out shots, obviously by my 10th shot, now I'm at like 1.5 MOA, and I just kept getting with that with the rifle. I'd be like 1.5 MOA, and every time I would come back to the range, my zero would be off. I was convinced that the scope's broken, because it was the only thing that makes sense. I couldn't come up with any other reason why every single time I would come back, my zero would not have held, and I would wind up shooting a 1.5 MOA group, when I know for a fact, because I've already shot this rifle, that it can shoot sub MOA. So in my head, that eliminated the barrel from the equation because I already knew it could perform. That was a fact. That barrel can perform. So I just kept glossing over it and not paying attention to it because I'm like, I know that barrel can perform. Therefore, the only thing left would be the scope or possibly the ammunition. So I go out and I'm like, well, let's test the ammo. So same shit. My zero's off. I shoot it a bunch of times to get it on zero. And then I shoot it some more times. I throw a 1.5 MOA group. Then I'm like, well, let's test a different ammo. Load in a different ammo. I shot like a 3 MOA group. And yeah, that I was convinced it was a scope. Finally, somebody, talked some reason into me, and they're like, hey, just go to the range, stop trying to zero it, throw a group. Test the barrel itself. This way you can eliminate that from the equation. And I shot a sub MOA group. I'm like, oh, well, okay. So then I correct it. This particular time it was actually down here, but I had taken off the scope, so, you're going to have some shifting. So I correct for that, get it zeroed. I probably pulled one of the shots because it went high, and from what I understand, if a shot goes high, that typically means you pulled it. So I do some testing, and I find out the whole time I've just been overheating the barrel. So, side note, a Magnum caliber on a carbon fiber barrel, pay attention to the temperature. If you're having problems, grab the barrel and touch it. If it feels hot, let it cool completely down and start over. Don't let it kind of cool down. Don't let it sit for a minute. Let it get, ambient temperature to the touch. Because you may be running into a barrel temperature problem. Now, again, like on the shredder, I didn't run into that, but that produces far less heat. Yeah, you'd start to see it open up as it would warm up, but not off of 20 rounds. I'd be on like my second mag, and I'd kind of see it open up, and in my head, I'm like, okay, the barrel's warm. Let it cool down. Yep, sure shit. Good to go. So that is the story of exactly why I was shitting on the scope so bad, and I was wrong. It does not change the fact that it is in fact a budget scope. Remember, you're looking at the class. If you spent $2 grand on a crotch rocket, is that a budget crotch rocket? You have to put it into perspective in the box of scopes that fit inside of what this can do. This is at the very bottom of it. This is the bottom of the barrel. After this scope, you're only climbing up. If you want the premium in that class, you're going to spend something like $6,000. Anyway, thank you for watching. Again, I apologize to Leupold for shitting on their equipment when it wasn't their equipment's fault. If you'd like to help support the channel, I got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.